Hey people, it's Steel Gamer here with a video that I wanted to use as a reply for somebody named the Cardboard Herald. The Cardboard Herald had a video explaining how to play Dragon Dice, and I had left a comment under there explaining that since SFR took over the company, there's still a bunch of problems with their rules and they don't make any sense. And he asked me what I was talking about, so I said I would make a video and leave it as a reply under his channel. So, before going into that, I just want to clarify that when I'm talking to the video, I'm actually addressing the Cardboard Herald. And the second thing, before I get into anything in this video, I do need to establish where I'm coming from, so you know I'm not just some random person that came out of nowhere nitpicking things. I want to explain that before SFR took over the company, while it was under TSR, I went on a massive collecting spree, and I was a heavy Dragon Dice player. I had stuff that could only be gotten at Gen Con when it was in Wisconsin. I had dice that could only come out of books. I had playmats that were promos that you couldn't get. I had very specific races of dice that you could only get out of books. I collected everything the hard way. I had medallions. I had prizes. I had mats. I had velvet stuff. I had bags, everything, you name it. And I even had the first edition printing of the Dragon Dice Commander's Manual. So this is my point is that I'm somebody that understands exactly how the game was put together, comparing it to now, and that's what this video is about. I'm going to be explaining, I'm going to be going and pointing out the rules with the colors, the elements, the dragons, why they're an issue. I'll be using the Amazons, minor terrains, the summoning pool, and a bunch of other things that it's not one thing here. So the first thing I'm going to go get out of the way is some of the wording in here, and you have to keep in mind, what I am talking about does not apply to the people who wrote these rules or the entire audience that plays Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Second Rulings, which all agree with how they put them together. That has no relevance to anything I'm talking about. This is about whether a non-Dragon Dice player can read this and make any sense out of this whatsoever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I am going to actually read how they're written and decipher them and relay back to you as the viewer exactly how this sounds to somebody. And even though people are going to argue with me, those people arguing with me are the ones who are apt in the rulings on how Dungeons and Dragons work in SFR and things like that. They're not coming from an outside source, which is what a player is reading. So here goes. The first thing I'm going to get out of the way is something that bugged people, and it's a preferential issue, which is the word force. This is the only place in this entire rule booklet which this appears. And yes, this was made by TSR, but instead of saying a player's total army, it has to use the word force. That doesn't make any sense. It's like this is Star Wars or something. That, again, that's a preference issue, so we'll let that go. But now we're going to bring something up that actually pissed off a lot of people when they played it, because this actually caused a lot of arguments in tournaments I was in when TSR ran this. And that is the summoning pool considered inside or outside of the game? It has never been clarified, and the reason why that's important to clarify where this is because of how the rulings on some of the dice work that are actually in the summoning pool. Take, for example, minor terrains. A dice that leaves play cannot ever be put back in the game because it is considered removed from the game. When a minor terrain is put into the game, it's brought from the summoning pool. When a minor terrain runs its course, it is then put into removed from play, out of the game, and put back into the summoning pool. So, under that definition and context, a minor terrain is removed from the game and placed in the summoning pool. That alone dictates that the summoning pool is not in the game. People can argue that it's at the table, but it has nothing to do with that. The specific rulings on the other dice and how these things work, if you are taking a dice from the table and putting it into an area, and the rules state when a dice is out of the game, it can't come back in the game, and it's considered removed from the game. It doesn't matter where you place that die. Where you place that die is the out-of-game pile. If you place the minor terrain back in the summoning pool, guess what? The summoning pool is considered out of game. At the same time, it's considered in the game because you have to bring items from in there. So that's why it's important to clarify that. Next, I'm going to bring something up that caused a lot of problems in tournaments to the point where TSR wouldn't even allow them in the game, because they couldn't get a specific ruling on this, and this made no sense to anybody who read it. So we deal with the medium items. First, it says the medium items are 3 points for each pair. But then it goes to say it's only 2 points for the first pair and then 1 point for the second pair, but it just said there are 3 points for each pair. So the question here is, in the first sentence, how many pairs is it talking about? Is it talking about one pair divided in two pieces? Is it talking about two actual pairs, the first pair and the second pair? It hasn't clarified that, and it's saying they're completely different point values. Next, we continue going on. It says, while medium dice do not need to be brought as a pair, the first is always 2 points. The first what? The first pair? If it's not a pair, you can't say the first pair is always 2 points. This whole sentence needs to be abolished. So let me clarify how this needs to be worded. Small four-sided items are 1 point. Medium four-sided items are 2 points. Large four-sided items are 3 points, and artifact and medallions are 4 points. Very clear, very concise. None of this crap, we need to make an exception crap, BS. So that brings me to the second issue. This right here is the worst thing SFR has done to this game. They have literally destroyed the entire combat system by making this so complex, it is out of control. This came from 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons rules. And since SFR are heavy Dungeons & Dragons players, they decided it would be a good idea to implement a very confusing, idiotic, dumb system that even people who played D&D had a problem understanding. Let me explain how this is written. I'll first explain a normal procedure how Dragon Dice worked. I roll my dice against you. You roll your dice to see what the results are. I total mine up. You total yours up. Do I have special icons? Do you? Yes. Boom. It's done. It's done as one thing in one roll. That's how it's done. That's how simplified TSR had this. Now I'm going to explain to you, compare that to what SFR pulled into this. Roll the dice. Check to see if there's any existing dice to need to be rolled. If they have special icons, to roll them first before you count the secondary rolls, and then you have to tally up to minus something. So you add the first subtracting number to the second one. You re-roll that number to find a total that doesn't equal 0. Then you actually add up the numbers. Then you subtract the modifiers from the first roll, who have to be subtracted from the ultimate overroll from the first roll. If there's any regeneration, it gets deducted from the first half of the roll, but not the second half, because the second half has to come into play when it deducts off of the first half, because there's a modifier for the second area. If you didn't understand any of that, that's exactly what SFR has done to this. These are complete garbage, which leads me to the second part of what needs to be abolished from this game, which shouldn't exist in here either, and I'll explain why. And that is spells that have X in their cost. X spells need to be abolished from this game, and they need to stop making these damn things into an algebra problem. And let me explain what I'm talking about. Resurrect Dead. If you were to follow the procedure on how SFR actually has this, resurrecting a 3 health unit will result in taking 96 magic because of how they have the actual X system set up in this. The unit itself is 3. The X is 3 because that's what you're targeting. It's not the unit is 3 and that becomes X. It's the spell cost itself is 3. Since you're doing a 3 health unit, you now need to figure out how many 3 castings of 3 do you need to resurrect a 3 health unit. So first you take the cost of the spell itself, which would be 3. Then you take the cost of the unit you want to target, the health of the unit you want to target, which is 3. Now you need to figure out how many times 3 needs to be cast in that 3 health unit in order to actually bring it back. Since it's a 3-to-1 ratio, it's 3 magic for every 1 health. You have the cost of the spell, which is 3. That's the first 3. You have the second 3, which comes from the unit itself. Then you have an additional 3 for the first health, additional 3 for the second health, and additional 3 for the third health. So what happens here is you have 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Under SFR's system for getting your health back under that casting cost, that is the actual math you would have to do with that, rather than saying it's just 3 divided, it's 3 times however much you wanted to get the unit off of. So in this case, it should only take 27 magic to get this back. But the way SFR has it set up, it's an X casting cost spell that turns it into an algebra problem, which produces more 3s in that for a 3 health unit than necessary. And for those of you that didn't follow that, that's because you didn't want to follow it. Go back and listen, and I broke it down, and you will see that I actually have it very clearly explained where every single one of those 3s were coming from. And then it becomes a multiplication problem because they're originally saying you multiply 3 times that. Well, if you're going to multiply it, you have to multiply all the 3s. You can't just multiply what you feel like. So, that being said, let me move on. Now I'm going to go into the colors because I just did magic. So there are only 5 colors in this game. Blue, black, green, red, and yellow. Yellow represents earth, red represents fire, green represents water, blue represents air, and black represents death. Ivory and white, I don't care what this states, ivory and white are not colors. And the reason why I don't care if ivory is listed as a color on here is because the Amazon race specifically says ivory is not a color. It doesn't say it's not an element, it says ivory is not a color. Now, SFR may have amended that, but that doesn't change for the fact that that's what it comes down to. White is also not a color. Now, the issue here is, and a lot of people, including myself, had asked TSR, why don't you just make, instead of coming up with all this excess garbage that doesn't need to be applied to the Amazons, why don't you just make an ivory spell listing? So there is an actual ivory spell specific for the Amazons and nobody else can cast that. The reason why this is a huge issue when it comes to certain things and understanding how this game operates is because in order to cast magic, magic must be done at a terrain and the color of the terrain must match something that the race can do in order to cast that race's spells. Otherwise, you would just normally cast regular elemental spells. The reason why that's an issue is because that sets the standard where you can't cast any magic. Any army is not allowed to cast magic while it's sitting in the reserves. Because in order to cast magic, it was already clarified that you must be at a terrain. There is no such thing as a terrain at a reserves. Now, you can write all the exceptions you want, but now that contradicts how magic works in the first place. That's not an exception to the rule. That's a complete and utter contradiction. You can't say magic can only be cast at a terrain with a color, then say an army, a race that isn't a color can use one of the colors in the terrain, and then say you can only cast magic at a terrain, but say you can cast it in a place without a terrain. So there's a bunch of problems with this on the way this is worded. They need to cut all this excess crap out and make one thing available. Make the race with an ivory spell. That brings me to the next thing with white and dragons and ivory. And I'm going to focus specifically on ivory dragons. If you scroll up in these rules, Amazon's ivory has no element. Yet now it's saying ivory can use a single element. And I don't care that it's saying this is an ivory dragon. You cannot summon a dragon by any single one color element when ivory is not a color. End of discussion on that. Because it doesn't have any elements involved. Therefore, you need a very specific spell which it used to exist, called the Summon Ivory Dragon spell. I don't know why SFR might have removed that, but it's ridiculous that it's like this. Next, we have the Dragon Staff. There's no possible way you can do anything to an Ivory Dragon because there is no Ivory Dragon Staff. And so let me bring up to par here on about how dragons attack. The way dragons are set up to attack is they will not attack a dragon that they share a color, aka an element with, and they will attack dragons that don't share a color with them. Well, white dragons and ivory dragons are not a color, therefore they will not attack each other. Secondly, they will never be able to attack another dragon. And third, other dragons will never be able to attack them, because dragons ruling for attacking only works if the dragon does not share a color with them. But ivory and white are not colors, so that does not apply. That's why white dragons and ivory dragons cannot be attacked. They can by other dragons. They cannot attack other dragons, nor can they attack each other. So I just want to get that out of the way. Now, on to some of the racial stuff, the racial abilities and things like that, because this one really... I want to bring your attention to bone magic for the undead. I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to break down why this is ridiculous. When an army containing an undead takes a magic action, that means the marching army attacking a defending player. If the defending player is taking a magic action during the defense, that would apply. Just clarifying that. Obviously, everybody knows that. Now, here is where stuff gets messed up. Each undead unit that rolls at least one non-ID magic result may add one additional magic result. The reason that does not make any sense is because it doesn't clarify, first of all, if each undead unit that rolls one non-ID, that all of those, any non-ID magic results that they roll, so if there were 5 undead that in each one of them roll a non-ID, do all 5 of those get applied one time, or does only one of those 5 results get applied here? Because it says at least one non-ID magic may add one additional magic result, but it doesn't clarify what does that mean. What do you mean one additional magic result? Result of what? It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't clarify exactly which magic result they're talking about. Obviously, it has to be... No, it doesn't even clarify whether it's black magic or not. It doesn't even clarify what type of magic result, or what the magic result is applying for, or what they mean by magic result. I can just say take any magic result? I don't understand that. Now I'm going to get into the second confusing wording on this. The number of magic results that may be added in this way is equal to the number of undead units in the undead player's dead unit area, up to a maximum of 4. Hold on a second. You just said the number of magic results that may be added in this way is equal to the number of undead units in the dead unit area. So if there are 6 dead units in the area, then the magic results would be 6 if they all rolled non-IDs. But now they're saying it's all up to 4? Make up your mind. Is it the number of magic results that may be added in this way is equal to the number of undead units in the dead unit area? Or is it only equal to 4? Which is it? You just said 2 different things, contradicting the other. And so, when you're dealing with that, you're dealing with another issue here that combines both the top and bottom with something that doesn't make any sense. It says, the number of magic results that may be added in this way. The way has not been clarified. So is it saying the magic result of 1 being applied a single time? So if 5 undead units are rolled, non-IDs are rolled, only one of those units gets applied up to 4, but you can only use 1? This literally is ridiculous. This is the dumbest wording I've seen in this entire, aside from the point value. This is pretty stupid. This literally needs to be rewritten by somebody who has an education level that can clarify what the hell they're even talking about. If I were to say you can only use 1 result, then this, I would say use 1, roll any number of non-IDs, don't matter. You're only allowed to use 1 of them. Your choice, and then remove this entirely because that does not need to be there. This whole thing doesn't even make any sense whatsoever. So, moving right along, there's going to be one last thing I'm going to go over. Since I was talking about colors, I just wanted to clarify something about Dragon Crusaders, Dragon Lords, and Dragon Slayers. And since I'm here, I will point out that Ivory has no elements. Therefore, you cannot summon it with a single colored magic. It says it right there. So let me go down here and explain that. Dragon Crusaders, Dragon Lords, Dragon Slayers, Dragonkin, Dragon Masters, Dragon Hunter, and Dragon Zealots all have a white version of them. I have had them. I have used them in games. I've used them when TSR was around. So somebody trying to say they don't exist has no idea what they're talking about, because I have actually had and used them. So now you have a problem with the white versions of the clear versions of these, so you want to speak on. They're saying that they're each comprised of only one color, but that's not true, because I have white versions of these. I can show you them. I can show you purple colors of these too. I can show you odd colors. And so I want to clarify that there is a die that is not, I haven't seen it mentioned in here. Now, I'm not going to say it's not mentioned, but that is, let me see if that die is actually in here. I think it might not be in here. Let me see if I can actually locate it here. Okay, there's a die in this game called a King's Die. It is a purple dice that literally TSR came up with. It's a King's Die. And what you would do is you could roll it to basically promote a unit. And so the King's Die was considered part of the army, but couldn't be killed or removed. It was a very specialized die. That was a promo die. So it's a King's Die. And I don't understand why there's no mention of it in here at all, because it is legal. It is a legal dice. It is part of the game. And I'll see if I can actually pull up a picture of it. So give me 1 second. Okay, for those of you who don't know, this is a King's Die. It actually was a promotional at Gen Con. And yes, I actually had one of these. As you can see, it's got the TSR logo, and it's got each one of the races on it. Now, if you give me a second, I'll pull up the information. Okay, so let me just zoom in on this here real quick. It says, this special limited edition die counts as 4 health unit in your forces. Put it in your reserve pool during setup, and it'll promote your other units throughout the game. The King's Die never leaves the reserves, and it cannot be attacked or targeted by spells. 5 sides of the die depict King's ruling of the 5 races in Dragon Dice. The first kicker pack, see above icons, which is basically what it comes down to. If you have units in the reserve at the start of your turn, roll this die. If the King comes up, you may promote any reserve units of this race. Trading, obviously, you would do this for the dead stuff, things like that. Same race for the same. It's a 1-for-1. If the TSR logo comes up, you can choose any race for your promotion. So I just wanted to clarify that there are dice out there that are legal for the game. I don't know since SFR would allow you to use them in the tournaments, but they are legal dice because they were out. They exist. But if you aren't aware of the dice existing, because it's not in the rule book and that's all you're going by, then you don't know about all these specialized dice. Let me see if I can pull up another specialized die, because I had mentioned a few things, and I'm sure somebody's going to ask me what in the world. Okay, so I've actually managed to find white versions of Dragon Crusader, Dragon Zealots, and I'm still looking around for a few other ones, but I think I've made my point here that there are just colored dice that aren't mentioned, aren't brought up, that I'm pretty positive are still legal dice unless SFR doesn't want them in the tournaments or whatever the deal is. But the fact of the matter is, to make you guys aware of all this stuff, like I said, I'm not just some random person that came out of nowhere. Like I said, I've had every one of my dice had TSR logos on them that I've had. And I've never said I've had $8,000 worth of Dragon Dice, and I've had pretty much all of these dice. I had some borrowed from the turn. To clarify, I had a few borrowed from tournaments. I've borrowed some from people that, I had to gain some trust to get on. I bought a bunch of them. I traded some. I temporarily borrowed some. I had some from my friend that I was holding. So when I say I've had them all, I don't mean I've owned them all. I'm just saying I've had them in my possession at one given point in time or another, and I've actually used them so I know they exist. I've rolled them out of my hand. So the thing here is that I just wanted to get this out of the way. And so the problem with these rules really need to be fixed, and I hope this answers the Crusader, forget his name, sorry, the gentleman that I made this video for. So that's really all I have to say. This is TL Gamer signing off.